start out by asking how many of you love Rim Country? Okay. I do too. I'm a military brat. I moved here in 1979 when my parents retired. I did move away after I graduated from high school and went to college. But this is my hometown. In 1993, my husband and I were living in California, and we decided to return to Payson. He is also a local boy, John Wisner, and we came back and we've never regretted that decision. So I love this town. This is where I want to make a difference. Well, when I say this town, the greater Rim Country community. And I'll tell you, every time I go down to the valley, and I'm going to avoid it like crazy right now, but every time I go to the valley and I come back up and I crest Oxbow Hill and we see the rim there, I get that tug in my heart. I'm home. I'm home. So just love this place. And we're so blessed to live here. So as Shirley said, I do work, my day job is at the casino. I'm very proud to work for the Tonto Apache tribe. I've been there going on 15 years now. I wear two hats, training and development manager, and I also am the assistant to the general manager, Hubert Nancy, who's a very good man. So that's what I do in the day, and to serve my community, I am with NAMI Payson. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about my story and how I learned about NAMI. How many of you have heard before tonight, have heard about this organization? That's pretty good. I've done presentations where there's been crickets. Oh my God. All right, so that's getting better then, because we have a long ways to go in increasing awareness. But what I want to talk to you about tonight, oops, I forget. Shirley's going to ding the PowerPoint for me. Just
you want
go ahead.
Me to ding it now?
Yes, please. I'm going to cover these things. So just kind of ding, ding, ding. We're going to go over what is mental illness, the prevalence and challenges of mental illness, some kind of a crash course in NAMI programs, and finally something I'm very passionate about across many types of things in life, and that's the power of support. So let's start with a definition of mental illness. I think mental illness is kind of like that word team, or, we all know what we mean, but what is the definition? So here it is. A mental illness is a medical condition that disrupts a person's thinking, feeling, mood, ability to relate to others, and daily functioning. And much like diabetes is a disorder of the pancreas, mental illnesses are disorders of the brain, and they are medical illnesses. And as far as the prevalence is, there are many mental illnesses. So this just kind of gives you a sampling. 1.1% or 1%, 1 in 100 people, adults in the United States live with schizophrenia. This is a devastating mental illness. I remember learning about that in my first NAMI class, and I was absolutely blown away by that statistic because it's such a devastating illness. And you see, not that they're not great organizations, but there's a lot more grassroots funding efforts to make a difference in some illnesses that, when you compare to this statistic, are rather obscure. Maybe 1 in 10,000. 2.6% of adults live with bipolar disorder, 6.9% live with major depression, and 18.1%, almost 20%, live with anxiety disorders. So if we take a look at, next slide please, Shirley. If we take a look at Payson and we extrapolate those numbers, and we look at our, about 16,000 people in 2016, that would mean that about 170 people are living here in our town with this devastating mental illness, schizophrenia. 402 with bipolar disorder, also devastating. 1,068 with major depression. And almost 3,000 with anxiety disorders.
Wow.
Kind of brings it closer to home. I'm going to stop right there, Shirley, and I'm going to tell you my story. 2013 is really when I learned about NAMI. And I know we all have this in our lives. There are times in our life, there are moments really, where you can almost draw a line if you were to plot your life out. And before this moment happened, your perspective on things was completely different. And then something happens and it's, you've changed. Sometimes they're good things like the birth of a child or a wedding. That's a lot of moments, but For me, one of those moments was in the fall of 2013, and I was sitting on the couch in my living room with my husband and the crisis team that we called to our home, because that morning we learned that my son, who was 19 at the time, had tried to commit suicide. That was the beginning of the moment. And then one of the crisis team members asked my son, "Do you ever hear anything that no one else hears? Do you ever see anything that no one else sees?" And he looked right at the guy and he said, "Yeah, I see ghosts all the time." We were stunned. In the preceding months, his behavior had gotten more and more erratic. We knew something was going on. We were seeking some professional help. We didn't know what was going on. We didn't know enough. And so it all culminated in a very dramatic experience. And that was the line for me. At that time, I thought, my God, he has schizophrenia. Because that's all I knew about schizophrenia was that people with schizophrenia see and hear things. Right? That's not necessarily true that that's the only disorder where that happens. In fact, psychosis, which is when you see and hear things, is actually kind of like having a fever. You know, a fever isn't the illness. A fever is a symptom of an illness. So people with major depressive disorder that are in crisis, people with other bipolar disorder and other severe mental illnesses can also experience psychosis when they're in crisis. All right, let's go on to the next slide. What I've learned with NAMI and going to different classes and trainings is that so many of our greatest community challenges often tie directly to mental illness. So let's start with the huge one, the suicide rates. Suicide rates rose in all but one state between 1999 and 2016, with increases seen across age and gender, race and ethnicity. And this was according to a report by the CDC that came out in June of 2018. Among the ages of 15 to 34, it is the leading cause of death, second leading cause of death, and suicide is preventable. In some states, in this age group, 15 to 34, the increase in suicide rates has gone up 30%. So we are talking about an epidemic that is impacting our communities. Suicide, not always, but suicide is often paired with mental illness. Not always. What they actually found, there was a Washington Post article, and what they were finding was they would do these psychological autopsies with suicides, and they were finding that there were several who had no signs, no indications of mental illness prior to the suicide. But what they found is that our kids, our young people nowadays, are having an incredibly difficult time dealing with the stresses in life. The things that we assume happen, the bad stuff, the losing the job, the breaking up with your loved one, losing a close family member, having financial stress. So that tells me that we as a community have to do a better job about helping our younger folks deal with stress, with life's common stressors. So suicide is not the only community challenge that often ties to mental illness. The next slide has several others. We've got homelessness, family dysfunction, self-harm, where somebody cuts himself or does other things it's self-destructive. That's suicide up there. Incarceration, drug and alcohol abuse, hospitalization. The list goes on. And many times these relate directly to a mental illness that has either been undiagnosed, unknown, or untreated, because there's so much stigma. People don't want to seek help and get ahead of the crisis, what we call getting upstream of the crisis, because they don't want our community members and our family and our friends to think less of us. So that stigma deters people from getting the help that they need to live better lives. All right, moving on. So I told you about that story
Hi, Mom.
where with my son. And somewhere in the chaotic weeks that followed that instant, somebody, and I don't know who it is, I don't know if I read it or somebody told me, I really don't remember, but they said, Patty, you've got to take NAMI's family-to-family class. What? I hadn't even heard of NAMI before. So I went online and I looked on their national website and I learned that the very closest class was in Scottsdale, at this big church in Scottsdale. So in January of 2014, after work on Thursdays for 12 weeks, I drove down there and I took this class called Family to Family. And I knew I was exactly where I needed to be because the looks on the people's faces, the other students, mirrored how I was feeling inside. Because unless you have a loved one with a devastating mental illness, you're like in a parallel universe. It's really hard and almost it's exhausting to talk to somebody who has sort of normal problems about the chaotic household, about the upheaval in your lives, about the desperate worry that they might try to take your life again, and you won't be there that time. So I went to that class, and I'm a corporate trainer. Actually, I'm an old elementary school teacher, but I teach adults now. And so about the second or third class, I started pestering the instructors. We got to have this class in Rim Country. How do we do this? How do we get this up here? And they said, well, you can bring it up there. You just have to go to training and get certified. Oh, and you have to bring one person with you because NAMI programs are too deep in leadership. So I kind of strong-armed one of my fellow trainers on the training team. She also had a family member with mental illness. And we did. We got trained on the family-to-family class. And in August of 2014, we brought the first family-to-family class up here. Mayor Evans, he actually came to the second family-to-family class and helped us present certificates. And I was always grateful for your coming to that because we were unheard of at that time. So fast forward to today. That second family-to-family class I always like to call the golden class because in that class they said, Patty, we got to have more programs up here. We need to do more. And I had this kind of vague notion of getting a support group started and then maybe moving towards some other programs. But they really pushed for that. So we had this really dedicated team form, and out of that, we became a 501c3. And today we have about 60 members. We want to have 1,000. We're greedy. We want 1,000 members. And just people in our community who are actively bucking stigma and helping connect people to resources and just being out there, increasing awareness. And that's really what we do is we learn and we connect people to the resources they need to lead better lives. And finally, our motto is bucking stigma in Rim Country, because you really got to get in there and make it so people are comfortable talking about mental illness, just as you would fight any other illness. All right, next one. So I wanted to give you this kind of metaphor that we have in NAMI Payson about support. And I have to tell you a story first. Am I doing okay on time? Where's Shirley?
Sure,
Oh,
I'm right here.
That's right, Mike.
You lost her.
So, going way back, when I was in high school here in Payson, sophomore in high school, junior in high school, I had a friend who was incredibly athletic, a super athlete. She still is. And she talked me into joining the track team and later cross-country track. And so I spent a lot of time eating her dust. Okay? And I can remember going out, we used to do this long run out at the Granite Dells area, and I can remember one day running behind her, and I watched her, she got up to that cattle guard, I imagine it's still there, and then it was just beauty in motion. She just increased her speed and she sailed over that cattle guard and she got to the other side and continued her run. So then I came along with my little short legs, and I tried to do the same thing. I increased my speed and I made that leap, and unfortunately I caught my toe in probably the second or third rung of the cattle guard, and I just slid on the gravel, several feet. Blood, gravel embedded. You know, if you lived here, you've probably done that once or twice, got gravel in your knees. So it wasn't pretty. But I want you to keep that image in mind, because the metaphor we use in NAMI now is, if you look at and this could be any hike, Horton, Sea Springs, we have so many beautiful hikes up here. But if you look at that one side, we have an individual who is coming out of a crisis. Maybe they've just gotten out of jail, maybe they're being released from the hospital after a suicide attempt, or they are taking that first tentative step outside their home where they've been homebound for many months or years from agoraphobia, and so they're coming out of a crisis. And on the other side of the stream, that's living well. That is enjoying relationships, providing for yourself and your family, doing the things that you love to do. But in between, there's this chasm, right? How do you get across? Well, if I'd known better with that cattle guard, I would have just stopped running and walked across, right, on top of the cattle guard. And unless you're really, really athletic and you can jump really well, chances are when you go hiking in rim country, you're going to look for rocks to get from one side to the other. So we look at any support in our community that provides support services for people with mental illness and their loved ones is kind of like a rock. And NAMI is just part of the picture of support in our community. We have other supports. We have CBI. How many of you know that Community Bridges now has, I think I last heard, 7 psych beds? So you can take a loved one, it is volunteer, so you can't force it. But if they're willing to get help, you can take a loved one to the front door who's in a mental health crisis, and they can take over from there. That is incredible, that resource. Because there's nothing worse than sitting in the emergency room with your loved one, waiting for a psych bed in the valley to open up or somewhere else. Southwest Behavioral, we got the St. Vincent de Paul Food Bank, we have various support groups around town, and NAMI has a lot of programs. Something I really love about NAMI is that all of our programs are free. We get donations and we have fundraisers to get the materials for the programs, but you can go to any program, support group, or education program, and everything is free. We might ask you to bring snacks once, but and you don't have to have insurance. You don't have to be on access. There's no qualification to participate in a program other than to have the particular perspective. You know, it might be a peer-to-peer program, so it's education for adults with mental illness, or family-to-family education for loved ones, close friends, and family people with mental illness. So that's just kind of gives you our idea that we absolutely believe that the more supports we have in our community to get upstream of a problem and to help our folks that are impacted with mental illness, the healthier they are going to be, and in turn, the healthier our communities are going to be. You remember all those pictures I showed you before? If we can connect people to the resources they need to lead better lives, then we're going to make our communities healthier. All right, I'm going to show, I passed out some handouts. It's the teacher, and I'm going to have to give you something. This is kind of a one document that does a lot of things, and please don't feel that you have to take it with you. If you don't want it, just pass it to the end of the table. We do spend an awful lot of money in print costs, so every year we go over our budget on that. But this gives you some background on our organization, and it tells you about our quarterly meetings. I'm really impressed that you all meet once a week. That's a lot of energy. Where's Shirley? There you are. And you're the secretary too, and the president. So that's. I hope you all give her a lot of appreciation every week, because that's a lot of work. Well, our board members are also program leaders, often in multiple programs. So this year we tried something different, and that was just to do quarterly membership meetings and quarterly board meetings. It's kind of nice, and we don't have as many meetings, but it's kind of not so good because we're losing our momentum a little bit. But what we do with our membership meetings, and I try and get them posted in the community almanac and the paper, is we try to feature a presenter who can help us learn about resources in our community. So our first one of the year, our topic was homelessness in Rim Country. And just last week, we had Maria Jagels from Sonoran Prevention Works talking to us about the opioid epidemic. And She passed out the naloxone kits, and they now have fentanyl testing kits, and it's another epidemic. It is taking out, especially one generation, just right and left. Next, our next meeting is September 4th. We are having two delightful ladies, I've had them before, and they are going to talk about making sense of the mental health system. You know what, it is very confusing, and they just changed everything. So, I'm a reasonably bright person, and I have tried to help my family member with the system, and it's very confusing. And it's easy to give up trying to get help. So she's going to, especially Maria, is going to try and help us navigate that system. And then this one, I know you all are very concerned about our veterans. In November, we are going to once again host the Be Connected training. How many of you have heard of Be Connected? Oh, Mayor has. Okay, we hosted it last summer, and it was very, very good, and we're going to do it again. And I passed out a Be Connected card for you for your... Be Connected is the Arizona VA's approach to, and the Military Families Coalition, I think it's called, to combat the higher than national average, which is already absolutely horrible, suicide rate of our Arizona veterans. And so if you come across a veteran who is in crisis, or maybe not in crisis, they just need some help, that is a one-stop shop to help our veterans. You just call the number. I think I prefer to call, but you can also go on the website. And what they're trying to do is just make it so one stop can help these veterans. And the lady that came and talked to us, she talked about a veteran who called, and he was worried because he'd run out of money. He'd paid all of his bills, but he'd run out of money. He couldn't feed his cat. So they ended up, I think PetSmart or Petco, one of those companies, they got him a year's worth of pet food. Right? So she told a lot of stories like that. It's not just, hey, we only offer these services. So that's a great card to keep in your wallet for helping veterans. I have to commend the mayor. When I was at a town council meeting, probably last month, I saw these on the table outside the chambers. And how many of you seen this? Anybody? I'll read it to you. There's a way to help those who might be demonstrating episodes of erratic behavior. Rather than do nothing, you might want to consider making a phone call to the crisis hotline and it gives the number, and maybe you might just save a life. So I thank you, Mayor, for putting these out there. It says Tom Morrissey, Mayor Payson, because that's what it's going to take. It's going to take everybody willing to go up to a person and say, I'm kind of worried about you. Are you okay? Because you're not acting like yourself. And you'd be surprised what people will tell you. And how relieved they are when they say, yeah, actually, I can't get these thoughts out of my mind. I've been thinking of ending my life. You know? So that is one of the numbers also on the card with the little horse on it. We tried to put a lot of the crisis lines on there for you. And something that's really great for the younger set, I'm a one-finger texter, so for me it's not so good. But you'll see the text line, and I've tried it, and it works, and then they don't like to let you off the phone because they're worried about you. But you can text that NAMI text line. It's actually not NAMI's line, but if you NAMI gets some credit for it. They will put you in contact with a counselor via text. You know, kids these days, they are way more comfortable texting than they are talking, and it's free. All right, so that's a great resource to have. Let's see. Oh, so I was talking about the program brochure. So you are all invited to the meetings. Any member of the public is welcome to come to our meetings. I think we're going to think about having food at the meetings, but that seems to get people there too. But I wanted to show you the programs, and if you're interested, keep this as a resource. But it's divided into peer programs, and when we talk about peers, they used to say consumers, which is kind of not a great term, but peers mean people that are living with a mental illness. So when we talk about peers in NAMI, that's what we mean. So the peer programs are programs for people with mental illness. And there's the Connections, which right now meets twice a month. And I have a flyer because we're going to start a support/education series, a 4-week series and I'll have those flyers. And then the peer-to-peer education, which I'm so excited about. So this is the, good, yes, bless you. This is the peer equivalent to family. It's a 10-week education program. We got our people trained to deliver it, and then the national changed the program and we had to get retrained, and I wasn't very happy about that. But I will tell you that I went through the training. I'm so impressed with the skills that they're teaching in this program, and so excited about being able to offer it. So it was worth it. It was worth it what they did to change the program. Presentations, I'm doing one right now, The Power of Support. We also have a very powerful presentation series called In Our Own Voice, if you're ever interested. That's another one that's gone into retraining, so we're getting our folks retrained. But we will actually have people come and talk to you who live with mental illness, and they will tell you their story. Very inspiring. The family programs on the right-hand side, we have family support group. Basics education is huge. That one I so wish had been around when I was a mom of school-age children. It is a 6-week education program specifically for parents and guardians of children with emotional disorders and mental illness, or if the parents even just not sure, they can come. You know, you have a lot of people that have kids with autism, and we welcome those parents as well. Homefront education, we just had our first one this year. And I have flyers on most of these if you're interested. I didn't want to push too many papers on you. But Homefront is a 6-week education program like Family to Family, but it's geared for the loved ones of service members, because NAMI absolutely believes that well-supported caregivers and family aid greatly in the recovery of individuals with mental illness. I absolutely believe that myself too. And then finally, the Family to Family education is starting in August. It's going to be on a Monday at the community college. They've been great friends of ours. MHA has been a great friend of ours. Rim Country Health, we have spots all over town where we hold support. United Methodist Church, Community Presbyterian Church, where we hold our programs. So that starts in August. And I hope that you'll let people know about these programs. We put them in the paper, but it's hard to get everybody knowing about them. Peer-to-peer also starts in August, and that's going to be on Tuesdays at Rim Country Health. And then finally, on the back, it's just our little membership information if you would be interested in joining NAMI. I always tell people there's a spectrum of commitment. We say we want 1,000 members, and maybe in 10 years we'll get there. Maybe next year we'll get there. Right now we have about 60. But can you imagine 1,000 members in NAMI, 1,000 people that are actively bucking stigma, actively connecting people to resources, reaching out to those who are not seeming well, and just being there for each other. So I get really excited about that. All right, I think we can go to the next one. Anybody recognize the gentleman on your right? You know what he's doing?
Climbing mountain.
Did somebody say Mount Everest?
Yes.
You're absolutely right. He's just crested Mount Everest. Has anybody seen the movie Everest? It's very grim. A lot of people die doing that.
Yeah.
I would definitely die doing that. Can't even make it across a cattle guard. So that gentleman there is Eric Weinmeier. Anybody hear that name? Eric Weinmeier. I didn't either until I learned this story. Well, Eric Weinmeier is one of the elite few that has made it to the top of Mount Everest. And he did this on, now I forgot the date. It was May 2001. What's amazing, even more than the fact that he made it there, is that he is completely blind.
Oh, yeah, I don't remember.
So if you want to get really scared, go and watch his travel, where in the video they took, and he used 2 canes, and nobody carried him. His team took him every step of the way. They guided him, and then he used those canes. And we're talking drops that I don't like heights, so it was making me nauseous just watching him negotiate those paths. But it's very inspiring. But and it's amazing that he does this. But to me, this is a story about support, about the team that said, "You want to do that? We're going to get you there." And if a blind man can make it to the top of Mount Everest, Can you imagine what people in our community that have mental illness can do with the right supports in place? And I want to end with one final story that's a little closer to home, with the next slide there. And just tap it once there. This is Emily Morton. Anybody know Emily? Okay. Emily is a delightful, I guess she's getting older, I think of her as a young lady, delightful lady in our community. And Emily is very candid. She's one of our In Our Own Voice presenters, very candid about her mental illness. And you can go a little bit more. Emily has PTSD. She has suffered from agoraphobia. And now Emily is a program leader. One more click there.
Agoraphobia, is that?
You're afraid to leave the house. Yes. Or
The house.
Emily she impressed a kind of a big wig in NAMI Valley of the Sun, which is a huge affiliate, so much with her story that they made her an honorary chairman for the 2018 NAMI walks. It's a big deal in NAMI circles, all right? And I want to show you this last picture. Emily attended the NAMI National Convention in 2018 in New Orleans. And when you hear her talk about her dark days and where she's come from and where she is now, it's just an incredible story. She and other peers like Emily are my heroes because they are out there and they are fighting and they are crossing that stream. So that's my presentation. I hope I've given you enough so that you understand a little bit more about what we're doing and who we are. And I guess the final slide there, Shirley. Again, I'm so thankful that you gave me this opportunity to increase awareness about NAMI Payson, and I'll just open it up for your questions.
Okay, we have rules for Q&A. We have 2 mics. Brenda, will you take the one on this side?
Over here?
Yeah, and I'll come over here. Okay, so you can't ask the question until you have the mic in your hand. You need to raise your hand, and we do one side, then the other. Okay? So, anybody? Okay, Bruce has a question back there first. Okay,
Hi.
hold it up.
I'll probably cry, but you'll just have to live with it.
We are used to that.
I have a brother that I think drank himself to death. What kind of a connection do you see between alcoholism and mental illness, if any?
That's a great question, Bruce. Thank you. And I'm sorry for your loss. We hear a lot of incredibly difficult stories, tragedies. And so in answer to your question about alcohol and mental illness, in my experience, if you take a mental illness and you add alcohol to it, you can compound it by about 1,000. All right? Alcohol is very, very destructive. Hard alcohol with somebody who's suffering from depression or bipolar or some of the other illnesses. Does that help?
Which came first, the chicken or the egg?
You know, there's this concept, and it's taken hold finally, and it's one of those things where I would think, really, that we had to arrive here. It's called dual diagnosis, and I don't remember the percentage. I didn't come prepared with a percentage, but it's a high percentage of people who suffer from severe mental illnesses have co-occurring substance and alcohol abuse disorders. And you talked about chicken before the egg, Shirley. In the old way of doing it, kind of the traditional response was, you're an addict, come on, we're gonna throw you into this program, this 12-step program, and you're gonna get off substances, and then maybe later on you can go work with your depression or your schizophrenia or whatever. You know? Or, you know, we're gonna get you medicated for your serious mental illness, your bipolar disorder, and then get you all stable on that, and then you can work on your addiction. Doesn't work. You fix one and you don't fix the other, and there's no cure. It's just recovery. Recovery with mental illness is living your best possible life. So now this whole concept of dual diagnosis and wraparound care is, we're going to take you as a whole human being. We are going to provide you the supports you need to learn about your mental illness, to treat your mental illness, and to work through your addiction or alcoholism. And we're going to help you get to the other side. And then we're going to create a series of supports to continue that recovery. That makes a lot of sense.
It does.
Why did it take us this long to get there?
Is there a question over there? Okay, tell us what was next and then we'll move forward.
Okay, I have a twofold question. You said the second cause of death is suicide between 15 and 34. What is the first?
The first, I'm pretty sure, is car accidents or accidents. But I need to check that statistic because I was surprised when I read that to you. It's from I was pulling slides getting ready for this. I actually believe suicide's the number one, but I'm going to double check that. But accidents.
Okay, my second question is the reason that we're struggling to reach this demographic, is it because of the advent of technology and electronics that they'd rather look at a screen than interact?
That is a great question. What's your name?
Phyllis?
Phyllis, that's a great question. And I think I don't have a research-based answer for you, but Patty Wisner says yes. You know, that if you look at the rise of social media and the rise in suicide rates, and here we have all these digital ways of connecting, but we're not really connecting. You know, and so I think that has definitely had an impact. Not only that, as our kids go, I mean, you know, you go on Facebook, and I know that's the old person's social media now. My kids are on other stuff, or my adult kids, but you go on Facebook and you want likes. I mean, these kids that started early with social media and the whole getting affirmation from their peers, they have actually wired their brains for immediate feedback, and it set them up for some big problems. So yes, I have a big concern about that. It's another story, but we've actually thought about a campaign of calling Reboot, where we challenge families to go completely digital free for a length of time, and then we reward those families for that.
Yeah.
So.
Okay, here's Greg.
How can you tell the difference between somebody's behavior as it being from drugs or from bipolarism? To me, it seems like it's really hard to tell the difference.
Yes, it is hard to tell the difference.
No magic answer.
There's not an easy answer. I think going to the class helps with that. There are certain characteristics of each of the major mental disorders where you can start to see what's going on. But what's so common is if you have somebody who's also using alcohol or substances, it gets really intertwined. You know, so. And I early on when I thought my son had schizophrenia, and I ordered from Amazon all these books on schizophrenia, and I was reading about it. And I remember reading a first-person account about a young man that had schizophrenia. And he talked about how when he was in the worst part of his illness, it sounded like 1,000 car alarms going off in his brain all the time. I would be using substances or jumping off a bridge. Can you imagine not getting away from that? And that is reality for some of our most troubled individuals. I'm sorry I don't have a better answer for
I
you.
think Glenn was next.
I've never had the personal challenges with alcohol or drugs where I've had friends have done that. I've been through the AA program more than 3 times. I know that the basis of success in these programs is always God. If you don't have God on your side, I have not known anyone to achieve the goals of getting rid of it. In today's society, when they teach these young girls, that's not a baby, it's a fetus. And later on in their life, they have to face these challenges, and they become more educated in aborting these babies. And like Colorado right now, the young kids are all doing marijuana. You know, it's all legal. And the suicide rate and the mental rate in those hospitals up there are like 300% up. So drugs and alcohol make this much worse. Sometimes we're taught, well, you have a drink and you relax, but that's not it. You're just taking one more step up the ladder to the end result of needing some greater help. And it'll only come from God in my experience.
Thank you for that. There's this term called self-medication, where you're looking for a way to deal with your illness that's not medically approved, and so you turn to things like drugs and alcohol and gambling and eating and other things. And in NAMI is a national organization. They've been around since 1979, started by a group of parents who were not satisfied with the system and were wanting more. It's a strong advocacy position at the national level. They advocate, they legislate. I remember I went to the 2017 convention, and I remember saying, I think I'm the only conservative here. And then actually there were others that said, no, we are too, you know. And we went up to Capitol Hill, and if you check out my Facebook page, I'm kind of a hot and cold sort of poster, but I try and stay out of politics, because mental illness doesn't choose whether you're Democrat, Republican, or Independent. I try and stay out of religious discussions, but I will tell you this. I have heard many times, and in my own life, in NAMI, we can't promote a particular religion as part of our program, but what we can do is talk about what has helped us. And many times, that is exactly what has helped people. So thank you for your statements.
Yeah, there are therapies for PTSD in Chinese medicine. And I've been a martial artist all my life, and I studied and certified under a grandmaster who was a doctor of traditional Chinese medicine. He taught me a thing is pattern walking. Walking 9 positions on a circle that are very angular, that stimulates the healing chi in the brain. And also some breathing techniques. What we're doing, now I have students that I've certified, and we are putting together a training that will be on flash drives and DVDs. And we're going to be sending it out to veterans groups around the country for people suffering, in some cases, senility as well. And it works. I've seen it work. I've seen it work on people with bipolar disorders. And we're working we're finishing up the video. And we have drone shots of people walking, and we have animation. And so we're starting over the next few months to send it out to veterans groups around the country. And there's a couple of them working with down on the East Coast. One is called Camp for Heroes, where they actually bring veterans and first responders suffering from PTS into a campsite, into a camp area with their families. The other one is Adopt a Platoon, and they fund a lot of these. And we're doing it on our own, my students and I. But the reason I'm bringing it up is that there are therapies out there. There are ways that work that we don't, because of our culture, we don't understand the Eastern culture. But acupressure works, acupuncture works, and Western science can't explain why. But as Len said, everything comes from God, and these tools are presented. And so it's not, the main thing to keep in mind is that we don't allow people to give up. And we present them with as many avenues as we possibly can. Because, even if we save one life, it's doable. So I encourage you all to look into some of these therapies and allow people to try them.
Thank you, and thank you so much for doing that. I hope you'll send jump drive to us too, in NAMI. We can have it as our resource.
Well, we're doing it. We're doing it on. We have a class going on Friday evenings over down at the Rim Country Health Club. And we have about 30 people that come to it, and we walk these patterns. And it is helping. There's some broken people that it is helping, you can see it. So.
That's good.
Don?
And then we have another speaker tonight too, so
I have one more right here.
one more, okay, after Don. Go ahead.
Go ahead, Don.
One of my daughters was involved in some domestic violence. Do you have any programs that help these victims for domestic violence? Do you have any programs like that?
NAMI does not have any specific programs. We do see victims of domestic violence in our support groups and classes. I would say the very best resource is the Timeout Shelter. I'm quite sure they have some outreach programs. But your daughter is welcome to come to support group. Many domestic violence victims have PTSD. And so we do deal with PTSD in the context of our support group.
Thank you.
Okay, and here's our last question. And then we'll go to our next.
My name is Ann. One of the things, I know I'm speaking to the choir here, but in this culture of death that we live in, these young people and all handicapped people are really a target, unfortunately, for things that we don't want to even talk about here because they're so destructive. But this is one of the areas of pro-life that we really have to get involved in, is helping our handicapped, our special needs children, and anyone.
Sorry, I am so sorry.
Sure, right. Don't put that on the speaker, please.
Anyway,
I am so sorry, I forgot.
thank you for not being political, but I think it's going to be forced on us, unfortunately. Thank you so much.
I'm sorry.
No, I, again, appreciate the opportunity to increase awareness. There's a phone number, there is an email, and most of the time I have the NAMI phone and email, so I'll be happy to talk to any of you at length later on. All right, thank you.
Okay, terrific.